So living in all these countries for many, many years allowed me to understand human beings better, because we are all shaped by the culture around us. We are shaped by our friends. We are shaped by the history of our country. We are shaped by who we hang out with, right? And so it's a really powerful experience to see how other people are living their lives.
Awekenge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by textWhat.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, textWhat. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
You are a high momentum life coach. Something, as you've said earlier, it's you learn a new thing every day. So, can you tell us about your journey into becoming a high momentum life coach? What inspired you to pursue this path? And what is high momentum life coach?
Oh, it's really like in anything we want to change in our life, about ourselves, about our financial situation, about our health, about our relationships. It always comes down to one simple thing, and that is to start. Because starting is the hardest and most challenging thing to do for everybody. And especially when we're changing habits, which is the ultimate goal, right? To create new and healthier habits in our life, in our communication, in how we earn money, how we take care of our bodies. It's really hard to get started. And I always love the example of imagining a big boulder, right? This big stone boulder, heavy, and someone says, okay, go push this boulder. And it's really hard to get it to start rolling, right? And you're like, oh, it's so hard. I'm working so much. And then you get it more rolling a little bit. And when you have that little bit of momentum, now suddenly it becomes easier for this big boulder to move. And then as you're building more momentum in this boulder, now to keep it up after a couple of months of work and investment and really working hard, it's much easier. You just have to tap it, but you have to tap it regularly. And so what I do in my work with my clients is to really help people develop this momentum in an area of their life they want to change and improve, and they have a bigger vision for themselves.
Still on the topic of momentum, I just want to add something. As you were explaining what it is, the phrase, the word Kaizen is a Japanese philosophy. That's what popped into my head. Doing that 1%, and quite very important to do that 1%, because sometimes to master something is, so people think that they want that instant gratification, whereas I'm doing it. If I'm going to do this, I'm gonna quickly become successful. So it's quite a difficult thing to always do that 1%. So I'm getting the gist of what is momentum life coach, and going to. Would you say that it's something that you really wanted to do at first, or it's something that someone told you upon in terms of reference?
Oh, it has developed over the years. You know, I've been coaching people for many, many years, but it was never really like my my business and my path and my full-time commitment. And so when I went into it 3 years ago and I said, I'm going to do this full time and I'm going to make this my calling and my sole source of income, it just became more real, right? Now it's about connecting with people. It's about impacting people's lives in a positive way. And the more people's life I impact, the better I do.
So before we move from just the initial conversation around my mental life coach, I just want to ask, in terms of you've been in a way in various countries, from Germany, India, the US, now in Mexico. So how has these diverse cultures influenced your coaching style and methods? As you know that in these different countries, they have their own cultures when it comes to general, in terms of how they see things.
Well, really, what impacted me the most living in different cultures, because it's very different from going on a holiday and going somewhere for 2 weeks and being in a beach resort in Mexico and then going back home. You don't really experience the people and the culture and the ways how things are being done. So living in all these countries for many, many years allowed me to understand human beings better, because we are all shaped by the culture around us. We are shaped by our friends. We are shaped by the history of our country. We are shaped by who we hang out with, right? And so it's a really powerful experience to see how other people are living their lives. That the one way how I was raised in Germany was not the only way. That there's many other ways how you can interact with other people, with the world. Like best example for me would be in Germany, we are very much focused on work and very cold and stiff. And here in Mexico, people are very heart open and very loving, and they love to party and to dance and to have fun. So it's a very different cultural approach to life to the German approach, which is all just about how can I work more.
And I can just in terms of agree with, in terms of that, because what I've seen, I had the pleasure of meeting a friend from Germany, whereas she came here for leave vacation actually, and she actually said the same thing, in terms of in Germany they have this thing of keep off, in terms of keep on working. And I just want to reference, go back to in the perspective of mental well-being. I feel like as much as when it comes to Germany in terms of mental well-being, I feel like that perspective, that philosophy, the way they are, I think as human beings we need to incorporate it in our mental well-being. As I mentioned, that mental health is a stigma that is still out there, but not like before. It has adapted in some way. People are adapting it in the workplaces. People, it nowadays everywhere, in social media, but it has this different perspective. And when it comes to Kundalini yoga, how does it assist when someone is wanting to find that healing, someone that wants to maintain that equilibrium of mental well-being, of healing?
Well, in my opinion, mental health is all about balance in your life, right? There is no good or bad way. Like the Germans, for example, work a lot, and the Mexicans are more relaxed and they party a lot. So not either of the two ways is the right way. The right way is to find, like you said, equilibrium, balance. Because in the balance, you can work hard, but then you also have fun and you play and you take care of yourself. And that's where mental health lies, in my opinion. Right?
Mm.
It's important to exercise regularly. It's important to do something that calms you down mentally. And that's the beautiful thing about Kundalini Yoga. It's a combination between yoga, so exercise, physical with your body moving around, and meditation, which is the balance to it, right? To sit and become quiet and go inwards. And all the religion and all spiritual practices around the world have one thing in common. They have this quiet introspection of just looking inside, for allowing space for your mind to go through all the busy things of the day and then allow those things to drop away and go in deep and connect with your essence, connect with your soul, connect with your true being, and recognize that all these things that are going on in our minds every single day are just mental thoughts and patterns. They don't make who we are as human beings. And so, what I love about Kundalini Yoga and the practice of meditation is to go in deep and allow yourself to feel who you truly are.
And I agree with you in terms of that because, but one thing that I realize is that the problem that we are facing is finding that equilibrium of not or just not knowing what is that equilibrium means in terms of, as for example, for let me make an example of my culture in terms of where I come from, the community that I come from, is the fact that we are not used to talking about mental health. We don't know actually the word mental health. What does it mean? Because we might see it on television, we might see it on social media, but we don't know what it means. So to us, being just I would say suppressing those mental thoughts and patterns, it goes back to the theory of psychoanalysis, the thing of the conscious and the subconscious, and there's this thing called the process called repression, whereas that's how I see it, whereas not only within my community as Black people but also within men in general, that which is your work in terms of helping men deal with divorce in terms of trying to evade the in terms of evade divorce. As men, most of men, and also I don't know if you know, it's Men Mental Health Month, and sometimes men find it difficult to talk about their mental well-being to their woman in terms of not because one of the reasons is because they are afraid that they will use against them, or that will be used against them during an argument, or they would seem as weak, or they will be laughed at because of showing their emotions. So in terms of that, have you had encountered such thing? And when have you seen men having the struggles of, in terms of how can I put this, in terms of mental well-being, of not knowing that should they continue on this marriage or not?
Yeah. Oh, it's the biggest challenge for us men is to be vulnerable
Mm.
and to be open and to really share at that deep level. And I love that you touched on all these important points because it's a big thing. For us as men, we have been taught by our fathers, by our grandfathers, for generations and generations to be strong, right? And to be the one who never cries and who never has a problem and who's always there and who can provide and who has that strength. So, a big challenge for a lot of men is to say, am I strong when I'm being vulnerable? Am I willing to open up to this feeling of, am I willing to let in those fears of, will these arguments be used against me in the next confrontation, in the next fight? And so it is very, very hard for men in general to show vulnerability. And that has to do with that all of us as men, we come from generations for hundreds and hundreds of years before us of our fathers and forefathers being these extremely strong people who never showed any weakness. What we do as men is anytime anything comes up where we feel insecure or we feel fear or we feel weak, we shove it away and we put a big lid on it and we try not to look at it. And that's the biggest problem in mental health, is that works maybe for a couple of months, maybe even for a couple of years. You can just keep shoving everything away and stuffing it down, down, down. But then comes a point when it all explodes and it all comes out. And that's usually the big moment where people come to me and they say, I don't know what to do anymore because I cannot connect with my wife. I do not have a foundation of trust. I cannot share my emotions openly. But when we really look at it, it's for years and years before, they have been rejecting that in their own life. And then it makes it very hard to be vulnerable and to be open, because we as men become so calloused, right? So shut off to the world that we lose our sensitivity.
In terms of dealing with such men through your work and through your experience, what some of the strategies that were very, I would say, beneficially to men?
The first thing is always to admit to yourself that something is not right. Because the moment you can admit that to yourself, not even to your wife or to your kids or to your friends, but to yourself, and you say, I have a problem and I want to work on it. That's the first step. And then the second step is to get help. Because another big challenge we have as men is we try to solve things alone. Because doing it alone means you're strong and you're powerful and you can handle everything and you don't need anyone's help. So the second part is to ask for help. Because especially when it comes to mental health, we trick ourselves into believing what the reality is, but we're not seeing it clearly. And the only way through it for all of us is with someone who can help us reflect that back. So the second most important thing is to get help. And getting help can be a therapist, can be a coach, can be a man's group, can be some person, can even be your wife if you have this really powerful, deep connection where you can share everything openly. Usually it's not the case. But to really get yourself the help that you need. And that's when you see changes and when you see improvements.
And I just want to in terms of with this sentence, I just want to agree with you. When I had a guest on the podcast when she said that you can't acknowledge what you don't know. It's something that goes back with this effect of acceptance, accepting that as you've said, something is not right. So you need to work on something, and it really, really hurts when I see the stats around suicide when it comes to men, because it is shown that the most people that commit suicide, it's men, and that's why I am so, in a way, vocal when it comes to men's mental health, because I believe that we can eradicate that stats in terms of how it's the effect of just bringing the safe space around men and allowing them to express themselves as they are, because you can't, I believe that I can't accept myself in terms of that I have this problem, whereas I know at the end of the day, I'll be charged for going to therapy. I will be charged of asking for help. And there was this video whereas it said that it was a hand where it wrote in help men. It wrote men help the society, said stay strong. And it's just something that I really try by any means to preach and try to eradicate. And but at the end of the day, it's hard because they are out there. They are not to offend some of the guests. When it comes to feminism, it's something that has just degraded men in some way of, when I say degraded, in terms of acknowledging their feelings, of not allowing them to express themselves. And it's something also I'm not quite sure, Alex, I forgot his full name, where he said men are, I would say that they are paying the sins of the patriarchy of the past, because back then women were treated badly. Back then women were seen as these people that were not allowed in these big places. So in terms of the conversation around men, it's something that I try by any means to be vocal about. Going to the initial conversation, how does spirituality and mental health link? Something that, as I've mentioned earlier, it's something that I just want to just try by any means to learn, try by any means to get necessary information on, not just talk about. As much as I'm talking about mental health, I can't just not ignore the fact that there's this thing called spirituality.
Well, excellent question. And I want to start off with a definition change, because for us, as in today's world, spirituality is very quickly, oh, that must be religious, or this is a thing where it's a spiritual sect and people are praying and singing together. So it's kind of this weird thing, right? It's this, oh, I don't know if I want to do spirituality in my life.
Mm.
For me, I define spirituality differently. I don't believe that we are human beings having a spiritual experience, right? Where we go to the church or we go to the temple, or even, traditional spiritual things out in nature, connecting. I don't think that is really what's happening. I believe we are spiritual beings coming to this planet Earth to have a human experience.
Yeah.
So when you take this as a preference, now it's not about, do I want to have a spiritual experience or do I not want to have a spiritual experience? You're a spiritual being with a human body, with a human experience, with human parents, with human siblings, with human problems. But you're ultimately a spiritual being linked to whatever you want to call it, the creator, the universe, God, whatever. People have given it 1,000 different names, but the essence is the same. We are deeply linked with everything around us on a spiritual level. So for me, spirituality has a lot to do with connecting to that essence. It has to do with sensitivity. And now, to answer your questions, how it links together is, for us as men, when we do not allow to speak about our weaknesses, our shadows, our things we're struggling with, what's going on in our mind, we become, how I said earlier, calloused in the process, because we disconnect from our sensitivity.
Mm.
So what I'm doing with my clients is allow them to become more sensitive to the inner spirit, which is something that is there. We all have it as human beings. There's not one human being on this planet which doesn't have that spiritual essence. And so when you start connecting with who you truly are spiritually, you become much more connected to who you are as an authentic human being.
Mm, mm,
And when you're more connected with who you are authentically, guess what happens to your mental health? It automatically improves. So I use spirituality and the connection to spirit, how I want to call it, because I don't like the word spirituality. I use helping people connect with their inner spirit, with their source, with their soul. And just doing that and just being able to listen and to be sensitive to the process, that automatically improves your mental health by 100%.
As much as we have spoken around men's mental health and what is high momentum life coaching, and going back to that, before I asked the question, the linking between mental health and spirituality, and I just want to get your views on this thing I'm going to be saying. Would you say that coaching is an optimized way of therapy?
It's an optimized way of what? I didn't hear the last word.
Therapy, because as
Of therapy. Oh, I wouldn't compare coaching and therapy because both, even though they have similar outcomes, have a very different approach. And both have their value, right? A coach is more someone which gets you an outcome, which gets you to go from point A to point B. You know, the root of the word coach, it's from the old English word for a horse-drawn carriage, which was a coach where people could sit in and you could get in the coach and go from London to Edinburgh, right? And so that is a coach. It's someone who provides you to go from point A to point B. And so, for example, if you look at the most successful people in this world, in the field of sports, in the field of music, in the field of acting, in politicians, whoever you're looking at, every single one of these people has a coach. You will not find one Olympic gold medal winner in the Olympics who does not work with a coach. Why do they work with a coach? They could also work with a therapist, would be very valuable for them to work with a therapist. But the reason they work with a coach is because the coach knows them how to get from running the same race in 1 minute and 15 seconds to 1 minute and 10 seconds. And that little difference makes the difference between winning the gold medal or coming 10th place. So working with a coach is about creating a plan and getting yourself the support in order to win the gold medal in your own life.
And just it's something that actually this thing, the reason why I ask such questions, the fact that I've seen how many people have become coaches, and people really prefer coaching more than therapy, and I feel like it is something that is growing more and more as years go by, because when I started this podcast, I didn't know what was coaching. I didn't know what was therapy. I didn't know even there was stigma around mental health. And it's such, I feel like it's something that I just, in a way, needed a clarity, because as men, we don't go to therapy. And as you mentioned, we don't ask.
Because it's a sign of weakness, right? Something is wrong with you. You're broken, so you need to go. And that's a big problem. That kind of thinking is a problem.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's important to take care of yourself. And it's important to get help. That help can come as a coach, can come as a therapist, or might be a really good friend of yours who really has the time and the space to allow you to reflect back and who will tell you straight out what's going on. But you need the help. And we all do, because we're human beings. We're not machines. And we do need to have that space to process our emotions.
Speaking about getting help, or actually, let me rephrase that. Speaking about taking care of yourself, as much as you you are speaking in a perspective of a coach, a life coach. How, in terms of personal perspective, how have you maintained your own mental well-being?
I do a lot. I have my meditation practice. I go outside in nature. I go for walks. I have myself a coach I work with where I get to be the client and I can process my own emotions and things that I'm struggling with. And so for me, this is really important as a coach myself to have my own coach. Because just because I'm a coach doesn't mean I'm perfect and I have all the answers.
Definitely.
I still have my own journey to travel. And that's very important to me.
It's something that is very crucial that you as an individual have, as much as you might be this something, but also you need, as you said, that we all humans, we all need help. It's something that some of us don't usually consider because I believe that as also I view myself as a high performer in terms of things of when I do a thing that is very close to my heart, I make sure that I put my 150% because if I don't, who will? And something that not realizing that I'm sacrificing the productivity for my mental well-being, and it's something that we need to take care of as human beings. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
My pleasure.
Thank you so
So
much
much fun.
having of having your own perspective, of sharing those perspectives, and also diving into spirituality and trying to not making it a religious thing, but also seeing that as something that we really need to connect with. And again, thank you so much for getting into the conversation of men's mental health. And as I've said, that it is a stigma that we need to eradicate. We need a stigma that we need to just take a look and consider that there are men are also human beings also, because just because I am a man in terms of so the society has defined me as this certain person, but I'm still human. As you said, we are all human and we need help.
Exactly.
And again, thank you so much for your
Oh,
time.
and thank you for doing this work you do. I think it's so important to raise awareness around mental health. And your podcast does exactly that. So I think it's amazing what you do. Keep up the good work and best of luck.